Okay, so you should be open, your math book should be open. You should be on page 607. Make sure that you also have a separate sheet of paper for drawing models. And make sure that you have, I think, just one extra colored pencil. Make sure it's not black or yellow, or unless you have a dark yellow. Just make sure it's not black. Make sure you can tell the difference between pencil and your colored pencil. Okay, so first, so what we're doing today is we're going to talk about multiplying fractions using models. When we multiply fractions, we are taking one fraction and we are repeating it, just like regular multiplication. So, let's read in the book underneath the title. Read along with me. You have learned to write a fraction as a sum of unit fractions. For example, 4/5 equals 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5. So if we wanted to model that, we would use our 1/5 fraction tiles, and I would take it and I would repeat it 4 times. 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5. If you put them all together, they equal 4/5. Now I know this might be small. Make sure you're watching this in full screen. That will help a little bit. If you need to pause and rewind, or pause right because I'm going too fast, or pause and take a short break, go ahead and do that at any point. So now we have 4/5. When we write it as a sum of unit fractions, it looks like 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5. Remember, a unit fraction is any fraction with a 1 as a numerator. We can also write a fraction as a multiple of a unit fraction. So, let's go ahead and go down to the build it, and we'll do that together. Okay, so right now, finger or pencil on the build it, and then read along with me, or read in your head as I read aloud. Use an equation to write 4/5 as a multiple of a unit fraction. So, before, we've been writing them as an equation, we've been writing an equation as a sum of a unit fraction, which is where we did the 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5. This time, we're going to write it as a multiple of a unit fraction, which means that we are using multiplication instead of addition. So one way is to use fraction tiles. You guys don't have your fraction tiles, and even if you did, you don't have enough of each one to do this whole lesson, so we'll just draw them. So for now, we have a box to show the work, but for the independent practice and the homework, you'll need a separate sheet of paper to have enough room. So for now, we're just going to do our models on our book in the My Work box. Make sure that you have a different color to use to show the different colors. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to model 4/5 using fraction tiles, and we're going to draw that result. We're going to go ahead and draw that model. So if I draw 4/5, it's just like when I used my fraction tiles a minute ago. I'm going to have my hole. I'm going to break it up into 5 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, we always count right after we're done to make sure we did enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We did enough. Let's go ahead and label them. You can go ahead and label them with your pencil. On the tiles, remember I have a dry erase marker, so I'm just going to write it underneath. 1/5, 1/5, 1/5, 1/5, and 1/5. This is the whole, but we're only modeling 4/5. So I'm going to go ahead and shade 4 of these 1/5 tiles. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I've modeled 4/5. You should have also done that in this My Work box. Now, how many 1/5 tiles did we use? Well, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4. I used 4 1/5 tiles. So we know that 4/5 equals 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5. Now this is an example of repeated addition. Remember, we did that when we worked on multiplication months and months and months ago. We know that we added 1/5 1, 2, 3, 4 times to equal 4/5. That means that 4/5 equals 4 times 1/5. I would repeat 1/5 4 times to get 4/5. So that means that 4 times 1/5 equals 4/5. Okay, so go ahead and turn the page, and now you should be on page 608. And let's go ahead. I will read the sentences at the top of the page out loud. You read it in your head. You know that 6 is a multiple of 2. Any multiples of 6, such as 12, 18, and 24, are also multiples of 2. The same is true for fractions. A multiple of a fraction can also be written as a multiple of a unit fraction. And we can see this with the triad. We have a multiple of a fraction, 2 times 4/5. We can also write that as a multiple of a unit fraction, which means a whole number times 1/5. So, let's look at the triad. Read the question in your head while I read out loud. Use an equation to write 2 times 4/5 as a multiple of a unit fraction. So in the end, we're going to get the same kind of answer that we got in the build it, which we got 4 times 1/5. So in the end, our goal is to get a whole number times 1/5 to figure out how many of those fraction tiles we have in our model. So the first step is to use repeated addition. We know that 2 times 4/5 looks the same as 4/5 plus 4/5. So now we can solve that the same way that we solve addition with fractions. Step 1, we add the numerators. 4 plus 4 equals 8. Step 2, the denominator stays the same. We have a 5 as our denominator in our add-ins, so the denominator in our sum is also going to be 5. So now we have 8/5. Normally what we would do now is check for simplest form, but remember, when we get improper fractions, we do not put them in simplest form. For this whole lesson, you will not be putting anything in simplest form, so don't worry about simplest form today. Just leave it as it is. So now what we're going to do, we have our answer to 2 times 4/5. It's an improper fraction, but that's okay. So now we're going to model 8/5 using fraction tiles, and we will draw the result. So we know if we're drawing 8/5, we are going to have 8 1/5 pieces, because remember our numerator tells us how many parts we have. So let's go ahead and draw 8/5. I'm going to take this, it's more than a whole, it looks kind of like a whole, but it is more than a whole, and I'm going to break it into 8 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I always count afterwards to make sure I have the right amount. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I will label them 1/8, 1/8. Oops, I'm sorry, I just said 1/8, but it is not 1/8. It is 1/5, 1/5, 1/5, 1/5, 1/5, 1/5, and 1/5, and now I'm going to color them. You can use the same color as before, you can use a different color if you want to use it, make it more fun. I'm going to use the same color. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So since 8/5 is a multiple of 4/5, since 2 times 4/5 equals 8/5, that means it is a multiple of 4/5. That means it also has to be a multiple of 1/5. So 8/5, we're going to count how many tiles we have, because that's how many times we repeated 1/5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that means that 8/5 equals 8 times 1/5. So now we're going to write an equation showing that 8/5 is a multiple of the unit fraction 1/5. Again, 8/5 equals 8 times 1/5 because we repeated our 1/5 tiles 8 times. So that means 2 times 4/5 is the same or equals 8 times 1/5. Okay, so now let's look at the talk about it. Number 1 says, write an equation showing how 3/8 is a multiple of 1/8. So this problem, we're doing the same thing that we did in the building. So we're going to take 3/8 and we're going to model it. We can model it to the side. You should have some room. Yes, you do have room. So let's model 3/8 to the side. If I have 3/8, that means I have 3 1/8 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1/8, 1/8, 1/8. And I'm going to go ahead and color it. You can use the same color or a different color. Because I know that 3/8 is 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8. Now, to write that as a multiple of 1/8, I am going to multiply the number of tiles I used, which is 3, times the unit fraction, which is 1/8. So the answer, the 3/8 times 1/8 is an equation showing that 3/8 is a multiple of 1/8 because you would repeat 1/8 3 times to get 3/8. Number 2 is a little bit like the try it, except that we are going to have to come up with both multiplication problems. The try it told us the first multiplication problem, 2 times 4/8. This one we have to come up with it on our own. So let's find how 6/8 is a multiple of 1/8 first. So we'll go ahead and we'll model 6/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to label them 1/8, 1/8, and then color them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I used 6 1/8 tiles. That means 6/8 as a multiple of the unit fraction is 6 times 1/8 because I repeated the 1/8 tile 6 times. Now, we also have to figure out how 6/8 is a multiple of 3/8. So what we're going to do is we are going to look at the numerators and think, what do we have to do to 3 to get 6? Well, basic facts tells us we multiply 3 times 2 to get 6. So that means that 2 times 3/8 equals 6/8. Because think about it. If we modeled 3/8 2 times, 1, 2, 3, 1/8, 1/8, 1/8. So there's 3/8 the first time, and now we're going to model it again. 1, 2, 3, 1/8, 1/8, 1/8. If we put them together, we would end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 eighths. So that means 6/8 as a multiple of the unit fraction is 6 times 1/8. And as a multiple of 3/8, it is 2 times 3/8. Okay, now we're going to do numbers 3 and 7 together, and then for the rest of them, you'll do it on your own for the independent practice. Okay, so the directions for this part say, use an equation to write each fraction or product as a multiple of a unit fraction. So for numbers 3 through 6, we have fractions, and then numbers 7 through 10, you have a product of a fraction because you have you have a multiplication problem. So for number 3, all we're going to do is we're going to model 3/4. We know that 3/4 is a sum of a unit fraction is 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. So we know that we need 3 1/4 tiles. So let's go ahead and draw them. Make sure that you are also drawing them. For numbers 3 through 6, you may draw them on your piece of paper. On your math book. But for numbers 7 through 10, you need to do on a separate sheet of paper because you don't quite have enough room. So make sure numbers 3 through 6, you may do on your math book, but numbers 7 through 10, you need to do on your separate sheet of paper. I will model how to show them on your separate sheet of paper when we get to number 7. Okay, so just like I said, we know that 3/4 will have 3 1/4 tiles. So let's go ahead and draw our 3 1/4 tiles. 1, 2, 3. We have 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, and we have 1, 2, 3 1/4 tiles. So that means we repeat 1/4 3 times to get 3/4. All you do when you are trying to figure out the equation for the multiple of the unit fraction is model the fraction, count how many tiles you used, multiply your unit fraction by the number of tiles you used. Okay, for number 7, when you are doing finding the multiple of the unit fraction for a product of a fraction, you're going to go on your separate sheet of paper, which is going to look like this. Please make sure that you are watching this in full screen. I know it's hard to see, but we're going to do our best. Okay, remember, the big empty section is at the top. Your holes are to the left. Write the page numbers, so pages 609 and 610. And then start at the top line with number 7. Okay, so on your separate sheet of paper, you're going to draw your model for you're going to show the repeated addition for 2 times 2/3. So if we are doing 2 times 2/3, that means we're repeating 2/3 2 times. So I'm going to show 2/3 plus 2/3. Now we just follow the rules for adding like fractions. We add the numerators first. 2 plus 2 equals 4. And our denominator stays the same. So we have 4/3. Let's go ahead and write that here. But we're not done yet because the directions tell us to write as a multiple of a unit fraction. So now we're going to go ahead on our separate sheet of paper and model 4/3. Remember, the numerator tells us how many of those unit fractions we need. The denominator tells us what the unit fraction is. So we know since the denominator is 3, our unit fraction is 1/3. Our numerator is 4, so that tells us we have 4 1/3 tiles. So I'm going to go ahead to my separate sheet of paper and I'm going to draw my fraction tiles. I know I need 4 1/3 tiles, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Each of them is 1/3. I repeated my 1/3 tiles 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So that means our the product of this as a multiple of a unit fraction is 4 times 1/3. Okay, so you're going to do the rest of them exactly the way we did them on this independent practice. On the back, I think you do have room to show your model on your piece of paper. So what you need to do, when you have just a regular fraction on your homework or the rest of your independent practice, you just do it just like this. Model that fraction, count how many fraction tiles you used, however many fraction tiles you used is your whole number. The fraction tiles, the denominator tells you which unit fraction you're using. If you have a product like numbers 7 through 10, that means you use repeated addition. The whole number tells you how many times to add the fraction part. Just like we did here. We knew we had to add 2/3 2 times. Do your addition just like we do adding like fractions. model the sum, count how many, go ahead and write the improper fraction, or sometimes it may not be the improper fraction. Go ahead and write the sum here. Then model it, count how many fraction tiles you used. That's the whole number when you multiply it by a unit fraction. Okay, if you have any questions on this, I will be available between 1 and 5 on Skype or FaceTime. Work through what you can for now, and then if you have any questions, save them and just call me on Skype or FaceTime and I will help you with the ones you have questions with. And then go ahead, try the independent practice right now before you move on to the next lesson, and then you can do the homework later today. Good luck.